First of all, I want to get away from the dictionary definition of a constitution. A constitution must have purpose, and the purpose must be to create a nation that conduces to the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good night, everyone, and welcome to another Globespan 24x7 talk show. This is a live program, so if you're listening to this program and you like what you've been hearing for the past few months, please share this link to your friends and family. It's available. If you're looking at it right now, it's available on that platform as well as on Facebook or YouTube. Welcome again, viewers, whether you're in Guyana, United States, in the Caribbean, or elsewhere. We want to say a warm welcome to you and hope you're having a great day today as we embark on another episode. This talk show comes to you with the compliments of Globespan 24x7 and Onohar Singh and his team out in the US and India. And I think his team also in Guyana. So we want to say how grateful we are and how appreciative we are that he's able to provide this platform to leaders in Guyana and in the diaspora to discuss critical issues that affects Guyana's development and the free flow of ideas. Of course, this show, while I do have prepared questions for my guests, I would love to hear any questions that you may have that we can consider and pass it on to our guests. So please ask your question or make a comment, and I'll certainly look at addressing them. With us tonight, as have been advertised, we have current Minister of Citizenship, Mr. Winston Felix, a former Commissioner of Police, and currently, of course, Minister of Citizenship. We have also with us an executive. pronounced on today. We can take it from there. So I'd like to start off, Minister of Citizenship. What are your thoughts on the pronouncements today?
What the judge pronounced on is exactly the thoughts of the government. We hold the view that house-to-house registration is the only way to provide a credible list for this election. House-to-house registration will allow you to find people where they live, and they will be placed on the list. And so we embrace it because we feel it is the best way to develop the list by visiting homes, identifying people according to their source document as a means of getting them on the list. And so the Chief Justice's pronouncement, we cannot be averse to it. It falls in line with our thinking.
Mr. Rohi, your response to what you've heard today from the Chief Justice and, of course, from our minister?
Well, there are two aspects to this ruling that the Chief Justice gave. The first had to do with the legitimacy of the house-to-house registration and the question of the naming a date for the elections. Well, the naming of the date for the elections, from our point of view, is a matter which the government has to settle. There's been no extension of the life of the government in respect to the two-thirds majority in Parliament, and therefore the onus is still on the government. Being a caretaker government and illegal in the sense that elections should have been held already and still not being held, that's a matter for the government to respond to in terms of the request that was sent by the leader of the opposition to the president. The second one, on the question of the house-to-house registration, almost all the rulings that were, all the decisions that were made by the Chief Justice basically coincide with what the opposition, People's Progressive Party, CIPIC, had been calling for. But there are some fundamental ones which I think fully coincide with our position. That is, for example, that no one on the National Register, the NRR, should remain intact. And whether you reside in Guyana, whether you're overseas, no names on the existing NRR can be removed constitutionally or ought not to be removed constitutionally. So that NRR remains intact. The exercise that is currently going on will obviously have to be cleansed, will have to be cross-matched, fingerprints, etc., with names that already are in the NRR to ensure that there's no duplication. So new registrants, legitimate new registrants are added to what currently exists in terms of the existing NRR. Then there's also the question of deregistration, which was something that we were concerned about, that the current exercise is not aimed at deregistering anyone. In other words, if you already registered, or if you're already on the list of registrants, that remains intact, and therefore there's no need for you to re-register.
Yeah.
So your name, like Clement Rohi's name, is there on the National Register. It cannot be removed. If I'm approached to register, I will tell the enumerators, the GCOM staffers, that I'm already on the list, and there's no need for me to re-register once again, because the Chief Justice's ruling ensures that my name remains on the NRR and would obviously come up on the voters list with the PVR or the PVL when that is published.
And Mr. Schuman, I want to bring you in on this discussion also on the list itself. Do you sense a fear of deregistration, and does it? And I know Mr. Granger has been talking about having a credible election, and a big part of credible election is the list itself. Is there a fear of deregistration? Is there a fear? And what might be some of those consequences if deregistration do exist?
Well, look,
if I can have Mr. Schuman, if I can ask Mr. Schuman to respond to that question.
Okay.
There are some things that I wanted to touch on from Madam Chief Justice's ruling there. And she was quite correct in stating that she cannot name a date for an election, because that is clearly and squarely within the remit of His Excellency the President. The Constitution does not give the court the right to infringe on the authority of the administration or to usurp their authority in that sense. But there is some the absolute clarity. While the court cannot set a date for elections, the Constitution of Guyana has already set a time within which elections must be held. So in terms of that, I think there needs to be a clear understanding of what the court said in not stating some things. I have to disagree with Mr. Felix in terms of what he thinks a credible list and all of these things, because I have the sense that he's, in that statement, saying that GCOM is incompetent by virtue of what he clearly stated there, because I know as chief in my community, GCOM officials went into my community in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 and registered every single person who was 14 years of age and above. And there's that someone who was 14 in 2018 automatically becomes voting age in 2019. So I think people need to disaggregate the credible information that is out there in the public domain and ensure that what they're taking is things with facts. When you talk about cleansing a list, I don't think that the Chief Justice said that there's only one way to clean a list. I was part of a hearing yesterday where I am challenging the order of Mr. Patterson. And what Madam Justice said in that is that there are a variety of ways to clean that list. Now, one question that I want to pose to Mr. Felix and maybe the other viewers who might be so inclined is, since now you cannot deregister someone, and one of their champion cries, as they were putting it, was that the list is bloated. Now, how do you go about taking away those names? Well, Madam Chief Justice really ruled that you can't deregister anyone. So I think the legitimacy in some of these arguments have been tossed to the curb in her ruling today. In terms of the election and what transpired, the credible elections, I've heard many things in my travels, in my life. I'm sure not nearly as much as these two gentlemen. But where did credible elections ever emanate from? Are you saying that GCOM is incompetent to produce an election that puts the state, that puts Guyana in a comfortable political frame? I think these things need to be called to the fore. We just had appointed a chairperson for GCOM that both the leader of the opposition and His Excellency agreed upon. Now, on credible elections is questioning the integrity of Madam Chairperson, and I think that maybe the people who are undertaking that aspect need to withdraw their statements and give the new chair an opportunity to do her job. And I think you are going to be surprised at what she is capable of if she is given the kind of independence and non-political interference that has dominated GCOM since Mr. Patterson was appointed up until Ms. Singh was appointed.
Well, and I know in Guyana, when we talk about any issue, there is, of course, two different opposing views from the two largest party in Guyana that has dominated the landscape, the PPP and the PNC.
Three views. Don't forget we're on now, Salim.
Is slowly shaping things. And the two biggest issue on hand right now is the election that Guyana or the Constitution has ordered, and the voters list, which is the basis for a credible election. And for all three of my guests today, I want to ask you, in the interest of Guyana and the interest of better governance, and as we approach a better new economy for Guyana, how can we bridge how can we balance election with a good list? Is there a way out of this, or are we stuck between this debate that will just go into infinitum? So Minister of Citizenship, Mr. Felix, can we? I know you're speaking quite on behalf of the government and the APNU. Can we have a balance, and what would that balance be between election and the voters list?
Well, before I proceed, there are some issues which were raised. Let me deal with the last one first by Mr. Schumann. Sure, there are more than one ways to provide a credible list, but a credible election can only be justified from the list of electors to vote in that election. And if that list is not credible, then the elections can be credible. We, from the government side, have contended since 2011, 2015, that the list is bloated. I want to tell you something now. There are birth certificates surfacing now of persons who are not on the GRO's record. How did they get those? Would be soon a subject of investigation. So those persons may never be found in the house-to-house registration. And what ought to happen if a person is found with a birth certificate that was not issued or was issued illegally? These are issues which have contributed to the bloating of the list. We are not after persons on the list or the removal of such persons on the list. We're after those persons or those names on the list that have not had any basis.
Mr. Felix, you are the Minister of
Secondly, before that,
and
I want to touch on what
birth certificates would fall under your purview.
Yeah, these were birth certificates issued in another period.
Maybe you can explain to us how this happened, A, and B, what has your ministry done to bring some regularity to that issue?
Okay. To explain what has just been discovered is the subject of an investigation. So I can't tell you how that was done. But what I can tell you is what we did when we came into office. We have hardened the security features so that the birth certificates would be difficult to be altered or in any way put in a fraudulent position. As you are aware, sir, we have had a history of false birth certificates surfacing, and there have been many cases before the courts where those documents have been falsified. The embassies in Guyana return persons regularly for verification of their birth certificates. So this recent discovery is nothing new.
Yeah. So
all we want to ensure.
And come back to my question.
No. There's another issue which Clement Rui raised, which I want to address, and that is the issue of illegality. The courts did not say the government is illegal, and it's kind of presumptuous for anyone to describe the government as illegal when, in the decision today, the court did not say or declare the government to have been illegal. So let's set that foundation very clear for the public to understand that we are not dealing with any illegal government. Articles 106 and 107 of the Constitution, which should be read in conjunction with each other, says clearly what the position should be after the no confidence vote. And the government remains in office until the elections are held and a new president is sworn in. So there can be no gaps in the government of the country. The government remains in office. That's what the Constitution says. Now, your question on whether we can move on with the list, you said?
No, my question was, how do we strike a balance so that both parties that have opposing views on the list and on the election date and the legality of the government and so on, how can we minimize that? What's the middle path? What's the moderation that both parties might be looking for so that we can get past our current hurdle?
I can tell you that for the government, we are going after a credible list. We don't see a credible list being such an objectionable position that even the other party wouldn't want that, because they want a clean list. I would hope, and we are striving to present an election that is founded on a credible list.
Mr. Salim, permit me to jump in here, please. Permit me to jump in here. There is something that I keep hearing, credible. Is Mr. Felix and anyone else who is talking about saying that all of the elections that have been held in Guyana have not been credible? And since we're talking about birth certificates, let's take a look at history. Let's take a look at who issued the birth certificate for the horse to vote in London during the Barnum era. I think, Mr. Felix, if you're talking about birth certificate, sir, your has been 4 years and nothing has been done about these issues. So to bring them now at a point when the government has been defeated and say that we are after a credible list, to me that shows the very reason why we are in this position is that there is great incompetence in the previous, or what I'd say this current administration that does not want to leave office, that they could not have addressed these things in 4 years. When you look at Article 106
so
and
you're talking
167,
about an issue which has now surfaced.
Well, obviously that means that your office has not done what it was mandated to do.
No, you can't say that.
106 and 167.
My
106 and 167 talks about the government shall remain in office.
Let Mr. Chuman complete his point, please.
106 and 167 talks about the government shall remain in office. I think to a great extent have to be shy of ignorant of what the Constitution says to think that government and cabinet are synonymous. The Constitution says that cabinet shall resign. Of course, no country can remain without a government, but when it talks about government, those are the operatives who execute the day-to-day functions of government, the permanent secretaries, the various officers in government. Cabinet and government are not synonymous. you could have a government without a cabinet. Those are some of the things that people need to understand. You cannot just blindly lead a flock off the cliff, and then when you get there and the nation becomes ungovernable, then you're going to say, oh, hold on a sec, well, we were fostering a smart society when you have peddled ignorance out of these utterances.
Yeah, Mr. Rohi, I want to bring you in. What would it take? What would it take for your party to accept the list, whether in its current state or in its state where it's going through right now, the process of house registration? Is this something your party is willing to go along with? And I know you guys you want elections as early as possible. What would it take for you to strike a balance, a compromise with the ACNU coalition?
First of all, the question of a credible list and a credible election, they are inextricably linked. You cannot separate the two. One facilitates the other. What we have to do now is to wait GCOM to meet and to pronounce on how GCOM as a body will move forward in fulfilling their constitutional mandate to ensure that free and fair elections are held in this country. So we still have that factor to consider, that is a statement from GCOM on how it will proceed in light of the recent decisions by the Chief Justice. That's number two. So lists and elections, and I assume elections are going to, when we talk about election, we're talking about credible election, because any other elections other than being credible, it's flawed, and it's not going to be accepted. Now, you come to the question of process. This list, once GCOM decides on the way forward in respect to how we're going to proceed or interpret, or how they are going to interpret the Chief Justice's decisions, one will have to be on the question of how to proceed or how to move forward with the list, how to move forward in respect to the ongoing house registration. By the way, the Chief Justice said, as I understood it, that house-to-house registration per se, nothing is wrong with that. But in the context of what is happening now in Guyana, in this rather unusual or abnormal situation, one has to take a whole series of factors into consideration, and that is precisely what she did. Now, we don't want to go into those details at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
When assuming GCOM produces a list, that list has to be handed to the political parties. And the political parties must now go with those lists, house to house, to verify that every name on that list exists. Or, if they're out of the country, then there's a period for claims and objections. Or if they're dead or whatever the case may be, there's a period of claims and objections which has to be agreed to by GCOM. What will be the length of that period, for them to go house to house to check persons in that list against who lived in that particular household, so to speak. That is precisely where the parties will be able to identify if there are any flaws on that list. Mm-hmm. And that is where individuals who wish this nonsense, for example, excuse my language, but that nonsense, for example, Mr. Ramjatan is raising about someone moving from, let's say, Betsy Grum in Kanji and living now at Parfait Harmony, that they won't be able to vote. That's nonsense. Period of claims and objections will facilitate that. The person will then make a claim that they're residing at this area now and have a change of address. The person who claims a person is dead, they will object to a dead person's name on the list. So what I'm saying is that there will be a period of claims and objections, as well as a period where the political parties will have persons going house to house to verify that names on that list
correct. And
are names the existing.
And I think the process that you've just outlined is certainly logical, but I think the political will is not there to fulfill their obligation based on the Constitution. But we've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm quite sure the political party spent a lot of time on this.
Each party wants to have elections.
And I think Guyana is kind of tired of this issue, and we've been half an hour on it, and I'm glad that we've heard your thoughts on it, and based on what I've heard, we haven't moved an inch. So with that said, I want to go to our core topic tonight, which was immigration and some of the issues that surround immigration as it relates to Guyana.
Before you move on, could I just say quickly on this question of birth certificate that Mr. Felix has raised? He's shooting in the
30 seconds.
Yeah, he's shooting in the dark here. He's saying that many false birth certificates were discovered. Discovered by whom? And that's one. The question is, it's easy to identify a false birth certificate. You don't have to wait for 4 years after to know. They contested all the previous elections. And if false birth certificates existed then, it was easy to identify a false birth certificate because it's not now, as he's claiming, that they have put more security marks on birth certificate. The security marks were there before. And that's how they could easily identify they were false birth certificates. But Schumann is right. If they discovered there were so many false birth certificates, what did they do to correct them? And Mr. Felix was a former commissioner. It's not a difficult task to deal with a false birth certificate in the hands of someone. It's like a false passport or a false ID card in someone else's hand. If a person turns up a GPO to uplift a parcel, or to send a parcel away with drugs inside and he presents a false ID card, police know how to track that. That's not, rocket science to do that.
Yeah, well, point taken, and I think certainly the minister will have his opportunity to answer some of these during our next segment that we'll be discussing. Well, you're listening to Globespan 24x7. This is a live broadcast. So if you have a comment, please do like the Globespan 24x7 page. Please share as wide as you can. We discuss issues that affect Guyana's development, and hopefully it will play an important role in having all the ideas discussed on a single platform. With that said, tonight we were going to be talking about immigration, and we've heard over the last few weeks about specifically on the issue of the Haitian migration into Guyana, and for some reason or another, some are not accounted for, some are accounted for, and so we want to get to the bottom of that, and then of course discuss the wider issue of immigration and how it impacts Guyana economically, politically, and so on. I wanted to ask my guests, Mr. Schumann and Mr. Rohi. There is an allegation, and this comes back to the list also, from sections of the community and sections of the PPP, that the Haitians are somewhat of a ploy to add to the voters list. Thus, the current house registration process to add the Haitians so that it could be a seat or two more, and you can win an election using such a list. Where are these allegations coming from? Have you found proof in it? And how do we? What would you want to tell the minister at this stage of the game? Mr. Rohi?
Yeah. The allegations are coming from the opposition. The allegations are not coming from the government. The allegations are coming from the opposition. Now, why is that so? And we have to look at context here. Now, this is an elections period we're in. And people tend to be very sensitive, going back to the question of free and fair elections. And the question of trust. How much can you trust the government and individuals who are in the government? And I'm not pointing fingers to any particular individual, although Winston's ministry has a big role to play with birth certificates, which is the source document, to get an ID card. That has been established and debated fully, and Winston is very much aware of those concerns. So, those are, I would consider, you see, we have to make a separation between two things. We have to make a distinction between a Haitian national as a resident within CARICOM with certain rights and the question of elections. What some people have done is to twist this matter in such a way to make it appear that the opposition has problems with Haitians per se. That is not the issue. The issue is whether it's Haitian, Trinidadians, or any foreign national, whether it's from CARICOM or a foreign alien, coming in such large numbers at a time when elections are in the air, and taking into consideration what I would describe as historical antecedents with respect to, remember this thing about bloated lists and false names appearing on a list, to give the government or the ruling APNU AFC an advantage in terms of the numbers.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Schumann, do you share?
It is quite a legitimate question that was raised, and I want to put emphasis on making the distinction between a Haitian national, CARICOM national per se, and elections.
Mr. Schumann, do you share some of the allegations by the PPP about the influx of Haitians and the possible, them being added to the new registration list?
I would have to say that the timing is very, very suspicious. In terms of allegations, I can't say that we've been in possession of any evidence to suggest that they're being added to the list. Now, when I say that the timing is very suspicious, and with the demand of the current administration for house-to-house registration, is that not an attempt to hide people who have come to this country illegally that would potentially be sympathetic towards voting for this administration? I think those are some of the suspicions that need to be brought forward a bit. Now, in terms of the immigration and emigration, I think I have to disagree with Mr. Rohi, in what he did not say, is that neither the PPP nor this current PNC government have done anything to stop the exodus of our educated young people. We continue to lose between 20 and 25,000 of our young educated people. Those were numbers cited by Mr. Rupnarayan when he was Minister of Education. And it still continues today. It occurred under the PPP. It continues to occur today. So we don't have a clear policy in place in how do we retain our young people. Worst, I think that I would have seen an immigration policy that speaks to what Guyana needs to do and where Guyana needs to go. We have all of these sectors. Last night I was driving down the road. I came from the East Coast, straight back to Georgetown, and you see a lot of people who are unemployed, who are idling all over the place. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about Dutch disease and the oil curse and all these things, it is already on our shores, and we have done nothing to address it. Where immigration becomes ever so important is how do we grow industries when we continue, and you could see from what Mr. Hines and Mr. Thomas and all of these government operatives are saying, it is not a matter of how much oil we have or how much money we're going to make, is what are we going to do with the money?
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
In that sense, then you get the entire nation to subscribe to idleness, to become lazy, to become lethargic. Mm-hmm. And When that happens, how do we now bring people into Guyana to support the very industries that this government and the previous government have done so little to address in a long and sustainable manner? We have to grow the population of Guyana to roughly 3 million to make it sustainable. We have agri failing. We don't even have a productive sector. Gold is on the decline. And these are numbers cited by the Bank of Guyana.
Yes.
This is nothing new. It's widely reported, right? So we don't have an immigration policy that I know of that looks out for the future needs of this country. I would welcome the Haitians. I'd welcome people from India, people from some of these disadvantaged areas. We've got who are being slavery. Let's bring them here. We need productive people in this country. But above everything else, what we need in this country is good governance. Good governance is going to deliver this country on a path, or put us on a path that is unparalleled in the history of the Caribbean, of South America, of North America, of the Americas, period.
And if I can,
but that has not been delivered by neither the PPP nor the PNC, and those are the things that we have to look at.
Minister Felix, the allegation by the PPP that this, and the timing, of course, and the suspicion that it creates, that the list is being revised and the immigrants are being added to it as a possible form of rigging the next election. What would be your comments on that?
That allegations by the opposition are groundless. The timing, to put it in its correct context, for a year or more ago, I was summoned before the Parliamentary Subcommittee on Foreign Relations, and I explained and delivered the arrivals in Guyana of foreign nationals, including Haitians. The questions were asked then, and I gave the explanation, because soon after we came into office, I was looking at the figures of arrivals, and I dealt with the Haitian situation. So I understood what the Haitian situation was and still is. Notwithstanding my explanations that the Haitians arrive and they use Guyana as a transit point to go to the east to Suriname, Cayenne, and to the west to Venezuela, South Brazil. That did not satisfy the opposition. They came back again this year, claiming that there was a huge ring responsible for smuggling Haitians and involvement in trafficking in persons. I've been able to show them recently that the police investigations and prosecutions have not uncovered one Haitian in criminal activity of that sort. Not one. Then they turned and they came with this list and bloating and using Haitians for the purpose of satisfying the list for a certain political party. Now, nothing can be more senseless to take people speaking French Creole to put them on a list. Who is interviewing them? What documents are they producing? That is entirely out of the question. No one associated with the David Granger government would think or even conceive the idea of doing such a thing.
Yeah.
They have not been able to identify the ring. All they have been showing is the hotels they go, they arrive at the airport, and they can trace them around Georgetown. That's all. My situation, my outline of the behavior of the Haitians in Guyana has not been disproved. Neither has the opposition been able to substantiate any of the claims they are making. Now to Mr. Schumann's point, Mr. Schumann has made the point which we are developing. We have one, the Diaspora Engagement Project, which seeks to attract Guyanese, qualified, educated, skilled Guyanese back to Guyana. The oil and gas industry is attracting its own to fill vacancies which the Guyana population cannot generate. Bearing in mind the nature of the jobs to be done and the qualifications of the people, that the qualifications needed to satisfy the job demands out there, you have to open up to forces.
Yeah, Mr. Felix, if you can give us, in terms of coming back to the core issue of immigration and the numbers, can you give us, can you guide us or advise us on what are some of the numbers in terms of immigrants coming into Guyana and that are leaving, and those that might be unaccounted for, and in particular, since we're discussing the allegations, the Haitian population that's in Guyana or thought are in Guyana.
Okay. Now, I had released some figures which I have here, and which can tell you about, I have a list of 12 nationalities. I can relate from 2015 to 2019, if you have time for that. Or I can...
You can give us the larger numbers, and then of course we can discuss those numbers.
There's things in the papers, man. We don't need to go through that again.
Right, I know that it's too large. All I would say that the top arrivals in Guyana have been the Americans. We have Brazilians, Trinidadians. The Haitians are way down the line.
The problem I have with Vincent's approach is
in terms of the departure, let me deal with the Haitians and their departures.
Yes.
Let me deal with Haitians. For 2019, my initial report said 8,476 Haitians arrived, but only 1,170 retraced departing. Now, my further work has brought a result from Brazil, and this was received today, which suggests that their arrival records of Haitians for 2019 is 6,886. Now, if you do the math correctly, you'll see that the 1,170, which is what we recorded departing, would leave us now with 7,306. And if you take away the 6,886, which the Brazilians recorded arriving, we would leave with a paltry sum, 420 Haitians unaccounted for in Guyana.
And I understand those numbers, and they were published.
Except the last set. The last set.
Yeah. And what is your ministry doing to ensure that immigration coming into Guyana is not meant for a transition into another country?
Look.
Is that the purpose of immigration?
I can go to the United States as a visitor. I have a visa for Canada. I can go across to Canada. Nobody would stop me once I present my visa.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what is this big thing about Haitians arriving and people. I will say this to you: the Haitians arrive perfectly legal in Guyana. They respond to all the requirements which the immigration asks them to satisfy. All those requirements they are satisfied. There is no problem with the Haitian arrival in Guyana as being legal. It is legal. They come, and as I just showed you, the Haitians would require a visa to arrive in Brazil. For this year, over 6,000 of them have gone to Brazil. The Brazilians have confirmed that these are legitimate arrivals in their country of Haitians.
And Mr. Schuman, I know your party has strong support in the outer skirts of the cities in Guyana. What if Brazil were to close their borders as America is trying to do with the Mexicans and so on? What will happen with these immigrants from wherever they're coming from, including Haiti? What will happen to them and the cities that are right next to Brazil, like Latam and so on?
Salim, I have to correct you on that. We also have a large support on the coast, not only in the hinterland, and I don't want people to get misled by that statement. We are a broad-based party that addresses the deficiencies that have been left by both the PNC and the PPP. So let's make sure that point is crystal clear. Before I go to that question, I want to touch on something that Mr. Felix brought up in terms of inviting remigrants to Guyana. And what I can tell you very clearly and very squarely is that there is nothing, and I'm going to say this for people who cannot hear me, they could potentially read my lips, nothing that this government is doing to support remigrants. And I'm going to draw cases to Guyana. When I tried to enter into the administration, to support elevating Guyana to a category 1 that permits us direct flights to the U.S., the government had nothing available. Even though they had this massive gap, were I to be part of that system, we would have elevated Guyana status by about 15 points to achieving category 1. In order to get category 1, you need a national carrier. Dr. Colin Abrams has been attempting to get Guyana Airways up and running for how many years? And this administration and they are to get approval just to fly from Guyana to anywhere. So when we're talking about reintegrating and bringing remigrants back into Guyana,
I think Mr. Schuman needs to state facts on that matter.
For anyone
that
out
was
of
a
this
Guyana
country,
Airways Corporation already registered, and they registered on that name. They cannot be two
Mr. Felix, I'm very well aware.
And that is where that attempt failed.
No,
I'm
sir.
They were using the same name of the old Guyana Airways Corporation, which was still on the record, and must speak the truth.
Absolutely, and what do you think the court ruled, sir? The court ruled that there is nothing that prohibits them from doing that. The reason Mr. Rohi, let me finish. The reason why that did not move is because there was some government operative that had shares in Fly Jamaica that did not want competition in Guyana. That is the reason why Guyana Airways has not gotten off the ground. We are talking about bringing remigrants back into Guyana, and we have no way, no mechanism to reintegrate Guyana. We have seen, and it was widely reported in the newspapers, that the PPP was given money to start an oil and gas program at the University of Guyana. They did absolutely nothing, and that money went missing. When the leader of the opposition was asked about that, he said, well, that is small money compared to what this administration got. And the amount of money that this administration got to undertake the very same things, we have to look at the facts. These things are widely reported in the public, and if there's a liable case, go after the people who printed it. But these two administrations have done literally nothing to support Guyana to become an oil and gas economy. Those are some of the things that we have to look at. So when Mr. Felix is talking about reinviting remigrants into Guyana to do what? To waste their time? We have to look at constructive ways of reintegrating people and bringing them back so that they could to Guyana. About the borders and all of these things, we know that indigenous peoples, when Guyana was established pre-1814 and 1814, and it continued to this day, when they drew the borders, those borders actually separated a lot of indigenous families that enjoy dual citizenship between Brazil and Guyana, Venezuela and Guyana, Suriname and Guyana, and those families still traverse the borders frequently. So how now are you going to disenfranchise these very people? You're talking about house-to-house registration. I want to know very clearly when the house-to-house registration is going to go into Massa Canary, or when it's going to go into Parashara, or when it's going to go into Cashew Island, when it's going to go into Iterengbang. These are some of the things that they have failed to address to this point. So when we talk about house-to-house and closing borders and people leaving and going, what I can...
Well, I don't know.
Is there a great degree of incompetence that has been exhibited that has not addressed the needs of the people? And I think those are some of the things that we need to maybe have a second discussion on.
Probably because the question of registration that you're raising is a GICOM issue. And GICOM has to deal with those issues. And no one here has talked about closing borders. Guyana is a welcoming country.
The gentleman asked me a question, which I responded.
For example, would have closed their border because they're also interested in ensuring that they're in and out population.
To the best of my knowledge, Brazil is a country which has always been very supportive of the Haitian migrants and have been very liberal to them. And I don't think in the context of Brazil, I can't speak for Brazil, that closing borders would be on their agenda. I have worked on that border, and I know the Venezuelan attitude to having a free flow across the border. So that has to be something very new, but the Brazilians are very liberal on border relations. So I don't see them closing the borders. And secondly, the
problem I have with your approach, Winston, and Schumann has taken a lot of pot shots at the PPP civic, and I'm not going to allow him to get away with it because talk is cheap, and I know he's trying to advance the interests of his party on the program by saying that the PPP did nothing, unemployment was down when the PPP was in office, etc., etc. All that is cheap talk. The statistics are there to speak for itself, and the programs are there to speak for itself also. So the problem with these presentations that I'm hearing, let's take Vincenzo. Transparency and accountability. Now, you're sitting there telling us that you have information and investigations have been done, but there's no full disclosure. There's no.
I said investigations have begun. I have never said concluded.
Listen to me. When police say investigations are ongoing investigations, that is a cover for not doing anything. I'm saying, as a former Minister of Home Affairs, when police would come to me and tell me investigations are going on, they have to give full disclosure to the public. There's a perception out there, and you're not dealing with the perception. The way to deal with the perception is to give full disclosure and to be as transparent as you can on the question every single day. Every single day, your ministry should be issuing a statement with data, just like the police does, giving information about so many murders, so many crimes committed, etc. Since this matter is such a sensitive matter, and especially at this time, you should be saying on a daily basis what is the situation in respect to all immigrants or all people transiting Guyana, so as to deal with the concerns of the opposition. That's their job, to raise those issues. Your job is to provide the information. You're the government of the day. You have to provide information.
Well,
So-
it is strange, you know, that
Hold a minute.
rules are made up as we go along, because we are 4 years in office. You had 23, and I am providing more information than you presented in 23.
The fact of the matter is you're in the government now. And
Yes,
you,
and
when
I am providing more information than you provided in 23.
you were, well, go to the Hansard in the parliament, you will see what I provided. You claim that you had all the answers when you were in the opposition. You claim you have all the experts now in the government. Provide the information and don't allow the situation to slide and the perception to grow.
The perception is sliding on falsities perpetuated by the opposition. It is the
Well, you have to
opposition
respond to that.
who is saying
Your job is to
that we
respond
are
to that.
bringing Haitians to supplement the voters list, which is far from the truth. It is inconceivable that that will ever occur under this government.
You have not been able to provide convincing facts, not information. You have not been able to provide convincing facts to dispel the suspicions and the perception which you claim is wrong in respect to this matter. And that is why it will remain for quite some time.
It will remain with the opposition, because the public at large is not following you and the opposition.
You
The
can't have a
public at large understands clearly, having made a clear assessment as to the general situation, that your situation is unfounded and it is based on untruth.
Word.
And
You
gentlemen,
can't have a democracy
yes.
with only the government voice being heard.
And-
Your
and-
job is to convince the opposition that they're wrong. You've not been able to
We are
do
convincing the nation at large.
yeah,
We are not selecting a group
the
of
nation
people
at
to
large will
talk.
judge when
We
elections
are
happen.
convincing the nation at
The
large.
nation at large will, that's just rhetoric. The nation
Yes,
at large
Come
will
on,
judge
Kevin. Come on.
when elections
So, gentlemen,
happen.
gentlemen,
That
before
goes to Mr. Schuman as well. When Mr. Schuman says he has a big support on the coastline and his big support in the interior, the more that I can say to that, talk is cheap. Let's wait until the results of the elections are held, and then we will be able to determine who gets what.
yeah, so I wanted to switch the discussion a little bit, and you guys have alluded it in your in few minutes ago during the same discussion about an immigration strategy. We are at the cusp of oil, and the economy is going to be exploding very soon. So I wanted to know what should be or what is the current immigration strategy in Canada, for example. They are looking for professionals, teachers and doctors and nurses and so on, that can help aid their economy. In Guyana, what is our strategy? Do we have a profile of immigrants that we are looking for? Of course, when slavery was abolished in 1836 in Guyana, the plantation owners were looking for labor, and they experimented with various groups. And we have in Guyana Portuguese and Indians and so on who came for that. There was a profile they were looking for to supplement the job market in Guyana. And I wanted to ask all three of you because you're all going to be vying for the in next election. What should be an immigration strategy that will supplement the growth of the economy, whether oil or not, because Guyana will have to grow, and it will have to grow with people, with ideas, with innovation, and so on. So, what would be your plan for an immigration strategy in the next administration should you win the election?
So
let me take that first, please.
By saying,
Mr. Rohi, give me an opportunity. I think you guys have had 23 years to display what your strategy was. I think as a new party, let me tell you what our strategy is, right? The first thing that we are going to do as a new party to ensure that people want to come to Guyana is to respect the rule of law. Let the Constitution reign supreme, which this current administration seems to not want to do. The second thing we're going to do is to try as hard as we can to eliminate corruption.
The court has not ruled that.
Mr. Felix, you'll have your 2 minutes. The people who are coming to Guyana from everywhere else in this world want to come where there is next to no corruption because they cannot subscribe to corruption. So what we intend on doing is to work assiduously to eliminating corruption. And you could see how prolific it is. I mean, all you have to do is pick up and read the papers, and you're going to see in many of these daily publications as to what's going on. There is no one who wants to come to Guyana and subscribe to corruption. They want a structured system that they're going to walk into an office, and based on merit, that they could get what is entitled to every citizen. All Guyanese who want to come back to Guyana want to do these things. When you're offering contracts to your friends to build roads and to do this and to do that, it disadvantages the people who have a legitimate interest in building the country. Then you're not going to find people who want to come here. I spoke of it earlier. We have an agri sector that has underperformed. This administration
that we should actively pursue immigration to Guyana.
This administration has killed. When I say killed, you might have to take this economy to the morgue when we're done. At least the agri economy. This administration has killed it. When we talk about oil and gas industry, you tell me what this government has done to bring into force or in anything that has to do with local content. It's like the cart has ran so far ahead of the horse that now the horse can't even catch up. Those are some of the things that people ask. People ask about why we're at this position.
I understand you might have a lot of concerns about a lot of stuff that the government is doing, but I ask specifically in terms of a strategy for immigration. Do you believe we should have a strategy to attract immigration? And what would that strategy look like?
Salim, that is what I'm talking about. No one wants to come to a country where the government does not respect the rule of law. No one wants to come to a country where corruption reigns supreme. These are some of the fundamental building blocks of society, fundamental building blocks of a progressive society. And the corruption in this country has been the cancer that has kept us at this level. And I have to disagree, and Mr. Rohi made a remark earlier, those are pot shots. Mr. Rohi, those are not pot shots. The fact of the matter is there are 78.8% of our country's population are young people. And the young people want to part with these things.
You're way offline. You're way off the mark. We're talking about immigration and oil and gas industry. Let's stick to that. Our position is as follows. Before we left the government, we had a documented cabinet. There's a document in the cabinet just before we left to deal with an immigration policy. And that was being worked on. One of the first steps we took was to open up the visas, to give more countries visa-free travel to Guyana. That's the first step. Remove visa barriers so that people don't have to go to an embassy or consulate to apply for a visa to come to Guyana. Number two, in respect to oil and gas, the question of local content is where employment will blossom more and more. The presidential candidate of the PPPC has said we'll create 50,000 jobs. And more or less, more than that, that is why the private sector, and we have said that the whole question of local content is critical for the growth of employment in Guyana and growth of the country as a whole, because the private sector is going to play a key role in the question of local content, and that's why there's a big struggle. There's a big fight on local content, because all the local players who will get a slice of the cake, so to speak, a niche in the market when it comes to them, their ability to grow, will come from the local content perspective, whether it's in transportation, whether it's in construction, whether it's in goods, whether it's in services, whatever the area might be. Local content is the key for the growth of employment and for the government to set the necessary parameters, set the necessary guidelines, not only in respect to the oil, because we have heard that oil and gas per se don't usually employ too many people. We've heard that. Now, I don't know whether that is true or not, but that is what has been said. But I'm saying for Guyanese as a whole, it is the local content factor that is going to play a burgeoning role, so to speak, for employment opportunities and for the growth of the private sector. We're running a market economy. We're running a market economy. All the political parties in this country are committed to a market economy. And therefore, we have to be prepared for the pitfalls in the market economy, for the vagaries in the market economy. And please, what you're talking about, Mr. Schumann, maybe exists in some other part of the world. We've heard about corruption in Canada. There was a big hydroelectric project that the Prime Minister of Canada had to deal with. And it's all over. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that we've got to be careful that we're not talking about utopias, or we're not talking about idyllic situations that don't exist or exist only in our heads. Naturally, we got to work to deal with these issues. We have to work to deal with them. And that is what to say that the People's Progressive Party government was corrupt. That is usually propaganda that is all over the place. The same thing is being said now of the ruling APNU AFC. Do you think if you become the president of this country, let me ask you that, do you think if you become the president of this country, how will you deal with corruption, and what way will you be able to get it out of the system?
Yeah. Well, the question on the platform right now is, and I want to address this back to Mr. Felix, is what is the current, and since you are in administration right now, what is the current immigration policy? And I'm still yet to hear specifics, and what are some your strategy moving forward should you win the next election and constitute the next...
Mr. Felix, can I take 30 seconds to address that point? Mr. Moderator, Mr. Rohi is asking, what will I do? Well, the first thing that we are going to do is to ensure that there's a second tier of police to investigate the things that the police seem not willing to do. And any minister that is found to be corrupt, we will have no problems putting them in jail. When you are going, if any minister wants to think that there is a safe haven under Liberty and Justice Party for any kind of corruption, you will be sadly mistaken, because Camp Street will be full.
Due process. Of course,
again, absolutely due process. But that is the essence, due process. And when found guilty, they're going to be prosecuted.
But you're talking just like this government taking people and putting them in jail. That's what you're talking just like this.
Well, if they're corrupt,
I wonder if I can have my time.
So here,
has no place in public administration, sir.
What you've just outlined, I believe, the APNU AFC coalition subscribed to that during the campaign, and we yet to see anyone.
Well, obviously, you see what they
But anyway,
we follow the rule of law. We will not be picking up people and putting them in jail. We
Mr. Felix, I think you
allow
very good on a stage doing stand-up comedy.
So far. On the question given to me.
Yes, your current strategy, and what will be your strategy if you were to win the next election?
Now, Guyana is a welcoming country. We have removed the one visa requirement for almost all the countries in South America, South and Central America, except so far Paraguay and Venezuela. All the CARICOM countries, so far, there is a no visa requirement, I think, for most 90 days, or yes, something of that, in that vicinity. We are welcoming, first of all, let me say this, that we don't see, while oil and gas is the thing, we feel that we need to develop the local economy. We have agriculture, we have business, and we would allow investors in who are willing to invest in the economy.
And while I think that's an ideal, the opposition, of course, many Guyanese would critique that with some aggression, that very little has been done in terms of investments, very little has been done to maintain other sectors in the economy, and much was being focused into oil, yet there's no local content. Well,
I can assure you that in terms of local content, for starters, there are very many contractors who have taken on various roles. I don't want to call names, in taking up the employment. In other words,
you should be able to call names. These should be public tenders anyway.
Yeah, right. I just want
well then call names. It should be public
there are
tender.
several contractors associated with Exxon and the others who have taken on the role of sourcing the visas for those who come to work on the rig. That is not a job done by Exxon, but they have outsourced it to Guyanese contractors. And so employment has been created for several Guyanese because companies in Guyana have taken on that role. We are open to investors who would wish to invest in business, in agriculture, in mining, in forestry.
Mr. Felix, would you say that your ministry and your government is actively pursuing immigration into Guyana to sustain, as you mentioned, the critical sectors such as agriculture and so on, including oil? Are you actively pursuing the qualified type of immigrants into Guyana, whether it's the Guyanese diaspora or whether it's others from around the world?
Of course we are.
Yeah, how are you doing it?
Well, we have a website on which
Vincent, listen. We put in place migration policy.
In which foreign nationals,
where everyone who wanted to remigrate to Guyana could come with their tools of trade duty free. Duty free.
That is available. There is the duty free available. All they do is apply.
And when I say actively, I mean, are we pursuing them? Because yes, you might have the intention you should come, but we're seeing that no one is using.
We have gone out there and we have laid our cases out, and persons are applying.
Embassies and the consulates overseas. How many of those embassies and consulates have officers who, and I'm not criticizing the foreign ministry, I'm saying the government. How many embassies and consulates have officials dedicated specifically to encourage to go out there in each country where they're located, especially where large Guyanese communities are, and encourage these people to come to Guyana? Economic diplomacy is what we started. And economic diplomacy was aimed at promoting investments in Guyana, as well as going out, reaching out to people with certain qualifications to return to Guyana, remigrate to Guyana, and to contribute to national development. I'm asking you, how many officials do you have? You're having all these outreaches in the country, electioneering. How many outreaches have you had externally in those countries where the Guyanese diaspora, not only Guyanese, West Indians?
We have been doing that regularly.
What has been the result? You've been
we are getting increasing numbers of remigrants.
Produce the data. Produce the data.
The data is not it's just that I did not work with the data. But we
I don't mean no. Publish the data in the Guyana Chronicle.
Salim, there's
you will get the data at an appropriate time. But I can assure you, Clement, that increasing number of Guyanese are seeking to return
I want the
to
public
Guyana. I can assure you also that we have improved and continuously seeking to improve our communication with foreign nationals. For example, we have online, the visitor's visa. We are right now proceeding.
But I think the challenge...
Salim,
No. Right now, we are exploring the business visa and the student visa application online.
Yeah. So here's what it is. I think the challenge for most Guyanese and most observers is that we have these things, but they're not being used, and that's the big question. But we have about 10 minutes more on this show.
I can assure you that the visitors visa online program is very active.
Salim, give me 30 seconds.
Based on that pilot,
one point I want to
we
make.
bring it on the business and the student visa.
Right, so
Salim,
permit
me 30 seconds, because I think Mr. Felix has an attempt here to mislead the country.
Mr. Schuman, just hold your thought.
Let
me finish this point.
The program time, and that question is, and it's a big part of what all of us are trying to do, which is to push Guyana forward. In the process of looking at an immigration policy and bringing more maybe qualified or otherwise people into Guyana to help build sectors and to bring innovation and to promote growth of the economy. How do we protect Guyanese jobs? How do we protect the best jobs to Guyanese?
And I'm glad.
Since 2015, Clement, if he was listening in Parliament, he would recognize that while we are inviting foreign nationals or come in,
listen to you.
We have at the same time required that before any job is given to a Guyanese, it must be published in the vacancy must be published in the local newspapers. And many
does not protect a Guyanese job.
Yeah.
I mean,
we are not allowing jobs which Guyanese are capable and qualified to perform to go to foreigners at the expense of Guyanese. In other words, we must force companies are asked to explore the local situation before you
that is very passive.
foreigners.
I must say that's a very passive approach to protecting Guyanese jobs.
The cart before the horse does. You have to know. You have to do a survey. You have to do a study to know where you need people. You have to do a survey in each sector to know how many people you need, what type of, I don't mean what type, what kind of qualified persons you need.
People are not going to wait for that survey to finish.
That overseas.
It is an active process. People are always seeking jobs.
The other problem with this, Mr. Chairman, is this. Apart from making sure that the Guyanese are given some kind of priority in terms of the vacancies that exist in the critical sectors or professional sectors, you have to also ensure that the salary scales do not bring anomalies to create difficulties in the system, which means to avoid that, you have to do very careful analysis, analytical studies in order to ensure that when you bring people to work in critical posts that the country needs, you do not create problems within the system in respect of issues such as salaries, allowances, etc. Because governments like this one tend to bring people, they give them free accommodation, free chauffeur driven car, everything they give them, and they have the local Guyanese in jobs, watching on at what's going on, becoming very frustrated with all these privileges that are going to persons who are not necessarily qualified.
Well, you were speaking as though there was never the Gaisuko experience. You're talking about this government without producing facts when there was the Gaisuko experience. You forget that one.
Yeah.
You forget about the man at Gaisuko.
Mr. Schuman, if you can take a stab at that question again. How do we protect Guyanese job? And when I mean Guyanese job, I don't mean mopping the floors and sweeping the streets. I'm talking about how do we get Guyanese at the highest level of every industry that the next economy promises.
Look,
it's easy, in my view.
Oh boy.
All you have to do is elect the Liberty and Justice Party, and we're going to get it done.
That's easy now.
But for the things, but for the things. Let's deal with the thing.
You can do better than that, man. You can do better than
it's coming. Give me 30 seconds here. I wanted to address this point. Mr. Felix is attempting to mislead the nation and attempting to mislead every single Guyanese in the diaspora by saying that the government wants Guyanese to come back. The government has done absolutely nothing. They may go and say, well, I'm pushing this visa, the places are open and all these things, but there's no way for reintegration. I'm going to tell you that over and over. Every single day I interact with people in the diaspora who are asking what is going on in Guyana, and when you hear about crime, when you hear about corruption, when you hear about not respecting the rule of law, they're saying, bye, me want to come to Guyana now. Me want to come back there and do this and do that. Right? The government has no program in place. Mr. Felix is talking about local content when, what? He said several Guyanese are employed. Why are you employing several Guyanese when we need several 100,000 jobs created?
I never said several. I said several companies
Mr.
have been contracted.
I wrote down exactly what you said. That is why I'm quoting it. You said several Guyanese are employed when we need several thousand jobs. Now, we have to look at what the plan for Guyana needs to be. If we're going to protect
you have to be realistic.
Absolutely.
You have to be very realistic.
Cannot now give American Airlines and Caribbean Airlines and all of these other entities, and that's just one example, all of these other entities a foothold in Guyana when we have one of our own Guyanese that wants to get into the market, and the government has taken an active role in denying them that opportunity to operate. Now, there's one company that could employ up to 1,000, and that is one sector.
The second thing, you have a lot of personal issues.
So
the second, you're not dealing with the issues produced by the moderator. You're dealing with issues that affect you.
So the second thing here now is that we have killed the agri sector. People want to come and invest in Guyana. We're talking.
So you have 10 seconds more, sir, to make a closing statement.
People and create Guyanese. We're going to bring people and create Guyanese jobs and protect those jobs. This administration had went out and campaigned on legalization of hemp. The hemp industry is a multi-billion, soon to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And all that these guys want to do is to go and capitalize on the votes of the people who are depending on them. And then when they get back in office, they're going to say it's not in their best interest. Well, Guyanese need to be given priority. We are bringing people out of the country and paying them more than the people in here. People from Texas are coming to work on the rigs in Guyana, and they're being paid, what, $150,000 a year, maybe more? And we are paying our Guyanese locals from this country, what, $12,000 a year. How is that comparable to the work that they're doing?
Well,
those are some of the things that we have to look at.
Moderator, just permit me. I mean, the comparison there is out of sorts. If you're talking about employment on
It
the
is
rig.
sorts for someone who does not
Those
understand
are opportunities
Guyanese.
created by Exxon and the other oil companies. You cannot compare that with the government jobs. They're two different entities, and at all stages, they will have disparities in payment. There's no country in this world where there is
Public
equal
sector
pay
jobs have certain
all around.
scales. Public sector
Gentlemen,
jobs have certain
gentlemen,
scales, unless you're on a contract.
Public
And you
sector jobs are differently
gentlemen, it's
financed
some
than
time,
the
and I
jobs from
really
the
want
How much time each one of us have? How much
gentlemen,
time each one of us have?
thank you all
You
very
must already
much.
this time
on this
already.
Tonight. It was a very lively show. And as you can imagine, the topic of immigration would be a critical one in Guyana's development moving forward. More importantly, in all of that is protecting Guyanese lives, Guyanese jobs, and of course, Guyanese future. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, all of you, Mr. Schumann, Mr. Rohi, and Minister Felix, for taking the time out and spending it with me, and all the viewers around the world who will be looking at these shows every Wednesday night. The issue at hand and many issues that we discuss here are critical to Ghana's development, and we want these issues and these discussions to stimulate all of our ideas so that we can innovate a better Guyana. With that, I want to pass it back to Devin, who I believe was doing a poll, and maybe he can give us the results of that poll. And then I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and may God bless you, your family, and Guyana.
The question we have asked our online audience is, should Guyana open up for more immigration in light of the oil economy? 45% responded yes, and 55% responded no. Thank you.
So Guyanese want the job. Let's get them the jobs.
Thank you. We'll get them.
Good night, and God bless you all.
Don't worry, with the PVP sync government, everybody will get a job.
50,000 women.
50,000.